Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 20 with Dr. Liz Gross. Really fun, awesome conversation about her story and her current work with Campus Sonar, a higher ed social listening agency. So they're doing really cool, kind of geeky stuff there, which I really appreciate. So just talk a little bit more about that and just what Liz is geeking out about right now. A lot of cool stuff that she shares. And as always, everything we talk about that you can find online will be in the show notes. But be sure to connect with Liz if you have any questions or comments. Always great to hear folks enjoying the show on social media. But also just make sure you kind of review and subscribe and just continue to share the show out. It really does help us out to connect with more folks who would be interested. So with that, and after a brief message from our sponsor, this is episode number 20 with Dr. Liz Gross. It's an honor to have our good friends at SwiftKick be a sponsor of the podcast because I've seen their work firsthand and it's truly unlike any student leadership training I've experienced. They've been voted Best Student Leadership Program unprecedented 5 times, so you know they must be doing something right. As a bonus for our listeners, SwiftKick is giving a $500 discount off their normal speaking fee if you mention Higher Ed Geek when you contact them. I highly recommend their trainings for your campus as your students will be talking about it for months afterwards. It's really great stuff. Check them out, swiftkickhq.com to learn more and let them know I sent you. Now, back to the show. And just appreciate you, taking some time out here. I'll link back to the old episode. Somebody who is kind of a return guest for me, first time on the Higher Ed Geek podcast here. But so we'll you can flash back to that episode if you're interested. But I just knew that you were like a cool person to talk to, and I think the current endeavor that you're on, which sort of made me curious to talk to you now. I think, it seems like you're very much taking up the mantle of like kind of geeking out and nerding out about, the things that you do and kind of how you navigate, the social world. So, I guess so if you want to just give the real quick to start out, the brief introduction of who you are and how you got to be where you are today, and then we'll get to all the other stuff.
My name is Liz Gross, and how I got to where I am today doesn't necessarily make any sense, but I started in higher ed straight out of college, as a student leader. Then I worked for a student organization coordinator for a national professional association, then spent 7 years in a couple of different roles on campus, mainly marketing focused. And then for the last 5+ years, I have been working in one capacity or another in higher ed adjacent work for Great Lakes Higher Education Corporation. So I started over here as their social media strategist, then became their social media and market research strategist, then became their market insights manager, and late last year, in October of 2017, was given the opportunity to found a brand new business within Great Lakes. So that was when I became the founding director of Campus Sonar. And now my gig is to geek out every day about social media, social listening, and how we can apply those insights to impact campus strategy.
Yeah, it's very cool stuff. And I think, and I know a lot of hard work went into, just having this exist for you now, but just like, from the outside, it was just cool to see because I think like things that you were sharing that you were doing all that, like seeing this like slow segue towards like you would talk about this thing that I felt like gained a lot of traction. Like a lot of people wanted to hear about it, and just like you can now kind of like really go at, all in on social listening where, it was just kind of funny, like seeing that like, gradual sort of move in that direction because I think it is something that's really valuable and really unique. And so it's just really cool to see. But I guess, thinking back to if it's, whatever sort of anecdote or thing that you can think of, like if there's a core of your college experience, when you were just kind of coming up and getting started, like what do you feel like your college experience gave you personally or professionally that, you still keep with you and maybe use today, any sort of knowledge or a connection or anything like that, whatever you might be able to think of?
Yeah. So a lot of them, I was trying to prep for a couple of these questions, and this was not in what I prepped, but I think about, I minored in technology and new media arts
Mm-hmm.
at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point in the early 2000s. So the whole tech and new media thing looked a lot different 15 years ago than it does now. But that really helped me realize like how all the foundational work that I'd been learning in business classes and communication classes was going to apply to things that didn't exist yet.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really helpful, like helping me really build some frameworks that were flexible for whatever changed with technology or media. But beyond that, I got a ton of leadership experience in college. I was co-president of one student organization, president of another. I was an RA, and I just assumed, once I graduated, that everyone else that I was entering the workforce with knew how to write a meeting agenda and run a meeting and run a conference and run an event. Like I'm sure a lot of student affairs folks do, but that was like all of those soft skills that have been so important in every single one of my jobs since I really developed in my student employment and my extracurriculars in college. I also have been very surprised at how much my undergraduate network is still playing a role in my life now, 14 years after graduation. I haven't said that before. That makes me feel old. Uh,
It's all coming for all of us eventually, kind of thing. I'm just like, it's just how it goes. It's how it goes.
Yeah. But I mean, people like my advisor in one of those student organizations, I now talk to regularly because she's a peer now. People that were my teachers then are now my colleagues. And of course, the people I went to school with, some of my very, very good friends, are still a part of my professional network, even if we don't talk regularly. So really understanding how, 10 plus years ago, the people I met in a role that is completely different from what I do now are still valuable, and we have important professional conversations on a regular basis. And I really didn't expect that to happen going to a regional, fairly open access public school. That's not one of the selling points. But it's definitely true. So I see a lot of remnants of my college experience, both personally and professionally. And I still go out of my way to meet up with alumni from UW Stevens Point whenever I can. I met up with one last week when I was at South by Southwest. So.
Very cool. Yeah. When I get, it's like part of that I feel like is like you're getting what you put out there. Like it's sort of like, yeah, you're like, maintaining certain connections. And I think in our modern world, and we have a lot of other things jockeying for our attention, it doesn't even matter that it's like, well, I don't talk to this person like every week or every month or whatever, but it's like people that you shared an experience with, or you just kind of, I don't know, putting in some effort, like it shows and it matters. And I know for me it's like, I feel like probably a deeper connection with other people from my like graduate school cohort, but then I always know, like, my alumni groups with University of Delaware, went to undergrad, would, welcome me, and I've tried to, like, at least keep that in the back of my mind of, if I were to need sort of a new social group or something that, we have alumni all over the place. And then, yeah, just generally, in addition to all the just, like, people, it's, like, I think similarly for me, like, it just gained, like, you're kind of getting at, like, your leadership style and skills and just confidence and all that, where you might not think of like, oh, one particular moment where I was just like, oh, I feel like I now know how to run a meeting. It's just like you cultivated that. And then like later on, you're just like, wow, this is really useful. Like, you maybe take it for granted or something. But yeah, so it's really cool. Just like that very, great plethora of things that you got from your college experience that, yeah, you're still able to use today. And yes, it's a while, but for me, you maybe just think that like I'm getting into those weird like milestones of just like, well, like I started college over 10 years ago, and like I'm approaching my 10-year anniversary from like, just these waves of, epiphanies and stuff. But it's like, yeah, you know what? It's, it's fine.
Is this what middle age is like? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, yeah, I mean, so all these things have kind of led you to be where you are now. And like, I was sort of getting at, like, I've just kind of admired that you kind of found something that you really geek out about, you enjoy sort of exploring, and has really sort of met a market need, or, you've kind of found a niche for it and that sort of thing. So like, now you've been doing it for a couple of months now, like what do you really enjoy most specifically about the current work that you're doing? And yeah, just kind of getting into that a little bit more.
So for the last 10 years, whenever somebody asked me what I wanted to do in the future, I responded kind of nonchalantly with, I want to be doing whatever I want. And people, would laugh and be like, oh, no, really, what do you want to do? And I said, really, I want to be doing whatever I want. I want to have some self-agency and leadership in what I do. And that's actually what I do now, which is kind of amazing. So I love that we're building something out of nothing in a space where there's really nobody to compare ourselves with, to follow along or to compete with, because we are building a market category, if you want to use the business terms, as we go. So I definitely, rely on mentors and networking and reading to help figure out what we're doing. But when someone asks what's next, like what's our next move, how are we going to do those things, I get to make a decision based on what I think and authoritatively say, well, here's what's next, and that's what's next. And I have not had that sort of leadership opportunity in my life yet. So I'm loving doing that. I also love that I work with an amazing team. Individually, they're all rock stars. There were well over a dozen people that helped contribute to the launch of this, as well as the ongoing maintenance of the business. And what we can do together is so much more than I would have been able to do when I was launching this from my basement. Mm-hmm. So I just love that they are all super invested. They're having a good time. And when I leave for a conference, every time I come back, they've done something new that solved a problem I didn't know we had. And just watching them grow, I really hope that not only am I having the time of my life and helping out a bunch of campuses, but I am also giving people a place where they can grow their own career and find their own strengths. So I'm just really excited about everything we're doing. I also feel really strongly about me working in the higher ed adjacent space where I'm helping campuses but not working on a campus, because we're scaling solutions and innovation in a way so dozens, if not hundreds, of campuses can benefit. And that's more than I ever would have been able to do with campus-based employment, even if I made it to an executive leadership position. So I love that we're being innovative, we're having fun, we're blazing new trails, and we're bringing campuses along with us so they can benefit as well.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, just like unique in so many ways. Yeah, like, because you could have theoretically, tried to get venture capital and start this as like an independent, startup, whatever. And like, but you have the appropriate freedom that I feel like you want and need from how you're saying it, but also, sort of backing and supporting and, kind of some scaffolding and stuff to help you. And then, just other people they can get, assistance from as well. But like it kind of, you could have done this on your own, but you didn't have to. Yep. And it, it's thriving, thusly. So, just so much new, it's just like nothing else like exists. And like, you're, blazing trails and creating something. Yeah. So it's really cool.
People ask me all the time, why didn't you do it by yourself? And for a while I was kind of hesitant as to whether I should or not, but I'm really glad I went the way I did. Because if I did it by myself, either it would grow so slowly because I'd be using my own capital to run the thing that it would take years to get where we've already gotten in 6 months. Or if I went out and got some investors, right, then I've got to do what they say because it's their money. So I chose basically to use my employer as my investor because I believe in the nonprofit mission of our company. And it's worked out well in that the people that I hire have salaries and benefits, and I don't have to worry about making payroll, and I can focus on just doing what we need to do for the business, not worrying where our revenue is going to come from or if we have enough investment left for the next month because we have the whole corporation behind us.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not sure of like, I've continually learned a lot more about sort of the higher ed adjacent and tech landscape and stuff, because I'm sure this happens in other, like, or I know it does, like other companies and stuff, and I'm just not even sure if anything like this, like sort of like incubating a company, and like, because theoretically, how my understanding of these things, how they can work is that like, if it got to a certain point where, it was generating a lot of revenue, or there was just kind of a change in the point of view, it could be like, oh, it's spun off now into its own like independent thing, they might just sort of do something else. But yeah, it's so unique that
a company that could sort of incubate something like this and provide a great service that people want, and utilizes people's skill sets and all that. And that, yeah, you're a startup, but it's not all these people jumping off of a cliff together. It's, you can have everybody have a sense of stability while they are, embarking on this adventure. So,
yeah, I've really, really warmed up to the phrase entrepreneurship, because that's really what I feel that we're doing. And it's, I get to do a lot of entrepreneurial things, but there's definitely a different slant to it when you're within an established organization.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I guess kind of moving past that, you're definitely, which I appreciate, geeking out about the, at times like nerdy work of analyzing data and that sort of thing. But, personally, I feel like from my understanding of your, just your personality and everything, kind of like a geeky, nerdy sort of personality, like really getting into stuff and like, kind of figuring out like the best way to do it, like you kind of take what you do seriously, kind of getting into like all the background information, that sort of thing. So, what are some things that you geek out about, currently and just kind of in your personal life? And are there any things that you have like always been into, stuff that you've maybe discovered more recently, however you want to kind of tackle the question?
Yeah, it's nice that you call it geeking out, because my husband calls it like obsessive personality.
No, it's just rebranding, right? It's not a bad thing.
Exactly. I mean, there's really, other than work, like 3 things I super geek out about. And everyone says, well, a lot of people say they like these 3 things, but like really, it's detailed research, everything. And that would be travel, food and fine dining, and vegetable gardening. So like, I'm always planning at least 12 months out for our next big travel trip. And I'm also scheming to do it for as low cost as possible in terms of flights and hotels. So I've got this whole travel hacking thing always going on in the back of my head. But then I also will plan out our itineraries like hour by hour, a year in advance. Because I like to have a plan. And even if we don't follow the plan, I feel better if we had one. So currently I am planning a trip for my husband and I over Thanksgiving. We're going to Egypt, Israel, and Jordan. So that's a fun one because I'm completely out of my comfort zone and have no experience in that area. Food and fine dining is the same. We make some food reservations a year out. And we're just completely obsessed with the idea of chefs telling stories through food. And then vegetable gardening is something I've been doing since probably like 7 or 8 years now. And when I do something, I generally kind of go all in on it. So I start all my vegetables from seed, and I try to grow enough for me to eat for an entire year. And when it's harvest time, like my kitchen looks like a farmer's market because I'm canning and preserving and doing a bunch of stuff. I have software to make like a floor plan of my garden.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Definitely a lot of geeking out there, but those are generally the 3 things that keep me busy outside of work.
Yeah. Because I think I've definitely always seen like how people geek out and sometimes like different shades or, kind of their sort of collective interest and stuff. Like it was funny one time I was hanging out with somebody like I just met in the greater DC area where I moved, and it was like, oh, you seem really cool, let's go get a drink. And I realized that we had basically the exact opposite interests. Like I'd be like, oh, have you seen this thing? They're like, no, I've never even seen it or heard of it. And they're like, oh, do you like that? And I'm like, nope, never, and like, or they also like definitely did not like the things that I did like. And we were just kind of like amicably just sort of like, oh, you know what? Like we could probably hang out, but we just don't have any of the same like references. So like there's that whole thing. But I think with you, like I have to commend you because I think I very much struggle with like, delayed gratification that way. I'm just like, oh, I'm going to plan this trip for like a year from now. I'm just like, I can't wait. That I'd just be like torture, man. Like I gotta, like the most I've ever done is maybe like 4 months, or maybe like half a year. And
that gives me anxiety.
Yeah, like where I'm just like, oh, I want to do that. I'm like, oh, I know it's like usually get a pretty good deal, like buying a flight like 2 months out. So I'm like, okay, I'll probably do that. And like because I'm just like, I want to go and I want to go now, but I want to get like a reasonable price. But yeah, it's just commendable because it's like you can benefit from planning ahead and either just like preparing and saving or just kind of masterfully navigating rewards points and perks and any of those sort of things. So, because I know you've written about that, and yeah, I've only slowly dipped my feet into that world, and I guess if I was
It's a
really getting
rabbit hole.
serious, yeah, yeah, it's a whole thing. But yeah, and I guess with all of that, because I'm sure, yeah, many of those like kind of intersect of like, oh, I'm traveling to a place, I'm like, going to a really great restaurant there or whatever. So, any anecdotes, I guess, of just like, you've kind of already answered it, I guess, but just like, these hobbies that you have, like, you could do these deep dives, you get really into it, some people might say, being obsessive or something, but, how do you see, this time that you're spending to do these things and, what makes it worthwhile to wait for, like, how do these hobbies and everything positively contribute to your life? How do you see that kind of coming together for you?
Yeah. So travel, I think, really broadens my perspective of the world. So when I travel somewhere or when I'm thinking about traveling somewhere, the first thing I do is buy a guidebook or two and then read part of it and, Google the rest. But I'm trying to understand the history of a place, the culture of the place, learn a little bit of the language, and really try to have a true experience when I'm there. And I will say, the people that we've met and the experiences we've had in places like Cambodia or Panama. Panama is only in the airport, so that's a really bad example. I was looking for Peru. That's the word, the P word I was
There you
looking
go.
for. Like Cambodia and Panama, Peru, which apparently sounds like Panama in my head, are the two places that really jump out as like I learned a lot about the people and the background and the society there, as well as the food for sure. But it really, it grounds us a little bit because we live a really stinking privileged life in this country. And really understanding, where other folks have come from and getting to know them. And then sometimes even staying in touch after we leave really helps me make sure I get out of my bubble as much as possible. And vegetable gardening. So I had some classmates in my doctoral program at Cardinal Stretch University. Being a faith-based institution, there were conversations about faith in the classroom, and I struggled with that because I do not identify with any sort of mainstream faith-based institution. And the folks that knew me, that had gotten to know me over a couple of years there, they actually said, I sort of think vegetable gardening is your spirituality. And I thought about that and I reflected on it, and I'm going to go with that now. Because if you think about it, like, it helps me appreciate the beginning, the middle, and the end of life for this, vegetable type thing. It gives me time out in nature where I have nothing to do but dig in the dirt. And it really is sort of my relaxation and centering activity. So I'm going to roll with that. Say that gardening is my spirituality. And then for food, if I don't cite my husband on this comment, he'll be very angry at me. So Aaron Gross has really helped me to appreciate that food is really like art, particularly the fine dining food that we strive to go try a couple times a year. It's if you watch Chef's Table or something, it's these artists are saying, I'm telling a story with food. I want the meal to take you on an adventure and provoke emotion. And that is why we get so excited about where we're going. We research the chef and why we take a picture of everything we eat so that we can remember it later. Like, that is really our art appreciation, is seeing what these chefs have put on the plate. So, I think my hobbies are really kind of contributing positively to my life in ways that, a classroom could as well. But they're a fun way for me to keep learning and connecting with people in the world and ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, just like that deeper, that's what I always love to hear when people have, all sorts of different hobbies where sometimes you might just mindlessly be like, well, I just, I like doing it. It's fun or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, there's value in that. But, yeah, just like because like for me, like I love craft beer, and I feel like that's such like a way to find very creative people doing something that they're really into. You get kind of like local flavor, and there's just independent small businesses in the areas, and they just are always a helpful little like guide point for us when we like visit different cities and stuff. So yeah, I guess just even like whatever you might do, having that deeper understanding of the value that it gives your life, because like hopefully you don't do things that don't kind of nourish you, or sort of like allow for connection to other people, expand your horizons, and maybe when you get out of your bubble and you come back home, you're like, oh, I had the these like synapses connect, and I came up with a new idea, or just even like kind of I always say kind of like zenning out, like you kind of just like I think can be calmed and kind of find your place in the world, or just sort of this appreciation of the world and humanity and art and beauty and that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, just those kind of unique things that you're into and kind of how they all come together for you. And I guess, maybe when you're traveling or doing anything else, when you're kind of like plugging in for work or whatnot, what are things that you're reading, you're watching, you're listening to, any sort of stuff that you're consuming right now that you'd want to, just give a shout out to that we can include in the show notes?
So I'm not reading enough.
Me either.
I one of the things I said I wanted to do more in 2018 was read, and I've been doing a very bad job at that. I've been working on the same book since January, which is Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. And I've got a bunch of other books on my bookshelf I have yet to read. So I probably read more Twitter than books, which is unfortunate, and I'm trying to do better. Watching, I don't watch a lot of new things. And only recently has the internet at our house in the country been fast enough to stream Netflix. So my watching is pretty much like Grey's Anatomy and Walking Dead, because old habits die hard. I don't even like Walking Dead anymore, but I feel like I'm so into it, I can't stop.
Yep. It's just like the sunken cost theory,
Yep. And then listening, I'm completely obsessed with the How I Built This podcast that interviews people that started businesses. Love that. And otherwise, I'm also really bad at picking new music. So like I'm still listening to Taylor Swift's album. That's been out for a while. And I have a playlist on Spotify called Slay All Day, which is what I listen to when I really need to get motivated. But most of the songs on there are probably between 5 and 10 years old, because I'm a little out of touch in that space. So if any of your listeners have recommendations of things I should be listening to, I am all for it.
Right. Well, yeah, we'll include your Twitter handle and you'll get a bunch of new Spotify playlist recommendations or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's funny. Yeah, like I'm like, I think in the middle on that. Like I'm kind of picky about new stuff that I get into. Like I love good like movies and television and stuff like that. But sometimes it's like, yeah, like I'm just slow going, or I'm just like, oh, I don't want to watch that because I'm just like, oh, that doesn't look like something I'm into. But it's like popular in the sort of the current zeitgeist. But yeah, so I think what I'll recommend. I just watched the final season. With my wife, we like went through the entirety in one day of season 3 of Love on Netflix, which I will highly recommend. I love that show, and it's a good one. And yeah, but I think it's just like, yeah, if you know what you're into, like we're like awash in content right now, and like at this point we've far past like peak content where it's like, not all of it is good. So like sometimes you're not missing anything, because like every channel and every like brand ever is just like, we should have like a whole TV network and we'll fill it with all original programming. And then Netflix is coming out with like dozens of shows a year, and like just like some of them have to be not good.
I read somewhere that they're going to produce 700 things this year.
Yeah, I don't. Because I'm bummed out. Cause,
so
yeah,
2
like,
a day.
Yeah, like because I love good stand up, and they've become like a new home for like stand up specials. But some of the ones that I've watched recently are just like, they're not good. Because like, that's what's the problem. Like because they're giving them. This is my problem, because like Chris Rock came out with one, and like the Dave Chappelle specials, and then like Fred Armisen had one. Like there's these like notable people that they know will draw people to be interested, but it's like, because the thing like Love and Master of None and like. There's other shows on other platforms too, but like that are giving other people the platform who maybe never would have been able to access it before, or they have a very unique like artistic vision and they're able to realize that. But then if it's like you're just giving these like stand-up specials to these like people have been around for a while, it's like they're good, they're done. Like their perspective, they don't really have anything relevant to say, because like that was like my problem with just like reading stuff with like Dave Chappelle, is that like he was just, his point of view is like he was in like a time capsule and he's now coming back, and it's like the world is very different than when you were last on the like national stage. So it's just interesting that way, because they're like giving it to everybody, whether it's somebody who, I guess from my point of view, whether they're like deserving of it or not, or sort of their what they're creating. It's just like nobody can consume all that, like 700 new things. Like nobody's like, I guess it's not the idea that like one person is consuming all of that content. They're trying to create like everything for everybody. But yeah, now I'm just like spiraling here.
If there is that one person that watches all 700 pieces of content, I'm sure they will send a tweet and let them know.
Right. Yeah. Like, give me more. I want more content. But I guess enough Netflix smashing here. So yeah, we'll link out to those things, and I mean, honestly, and I don't know if maybe you'd have, but like, I feel like every other person on this show has recommended How I Built This. Like, that show is just like having a moment right now, and I feel like they haven't even gotten started. Like, there's so many cool people that they could still talk to. And like, yeah, I love it, because like, I mean, a bunch of people started recommending it when I interviewed them for this, and like, I was like, oh, I guess I got to go check it out. And then like, yeah, gosh darn it, it is great. It is a very good show.
Yeah, a friend of mine recommended it about a year ago, so I think I've gone back and listened to every single one that appeals to me, and now I just get very excited for Monday mornings when the new one's out.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So yeah, we will end this episode here as we always do. If you just want to note something or some things that you are looking forward to in your job, in life, in the world, just kind of wrapping things up here on an optimistic note of what you're looking forward to.
So I'm going to leave the world out of it.
Fair enough.
I'll let somebody else opine on the future of the world. But I'm really looking forward to, in my job and my life, new experiences. I realized that over the course of 2017, I said yes a lot of times to things that I didn't know how I was going to do it. And every single time I've done that, it has taught me to do something new. It's gotten me more confidence, or opened a door that I would have shut for myself before. So I am just really excited to keep saying yes to things, even if they sound hard or difficult or crazy, because I've pretty much realized that most people don't ask you to do something you're not equipped to do. So I'm just going to keep saying yes. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Good stuff. I love it. We'll have ways to connect with you and Campus Sonar and all the stuff we talked about in the show notes as usual. Just really appreciate your time, Liz, and always good talking to you. Just have a good rest of your week.
You too. Thanks for having me back.
This podcast is a proud member of the Connect EDU Podcast Network, bringing together diverse voices and thoughtful discussions to the higher ed community. Check us out online at connectedu.network or on Twitter at ConnectEDUPod.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.